Welcome to our discussion on Greek architecture during the Archaic period, and today we're going to be talking about the treasury of the Siphnians. I guess that's what it is, in our best Greek right there. So to give you some historical context to this time period, this being the Archaic period, we see that this is a time of great new achievements for the people of Greece. We see that literature is taking off. You have the legendary storyteller of Aesop crafting his animal fables, and artists and architects growing in prosperity as city council members and the wealthy individuals are sponsoring the creation of extraordinary works of art. And today our focus is on architecture, and particularly the sanctuary at Delphi. Now this all begins because of religion, and according to Greek mythology, the chief god Zeus was said to have released two eagles from opposite ends of the earth, and they met, believe it or not, exactly at the same rugged mountain site of what would be Apollo's sanctuary. Delphi was renowned for its oracle. Oracles had this ability to be the only people that could communicate with the gods. And typically they were women. They're supposed to be virgins. So Delphi was renowned as an oracle spot, a place where the god Apollo was able to communicate with humans by means of cryptic messages delivered through a human, a woman, intermediary, or a medium at Pythia. Now, another thing that was important of this area, Delphi was also the site of the Pythian Games, which were a lot like the Olympic Games. And here we have an image of the stadium that held 6,500 people in it. And if you look in the background over here, this back wall, that back wall was built by corbelled stone. It attracted participants from all over Greece, and the principal events were athletic contests like the Olympic Games. But this is in honor of not Zeus, because that's why the Olympic Games were created. This is to honor Apollo. So on top of the athletic contests, you also had music, you had dance, and you had poetry competitions, because this is what Apollo is associated with. Now, visitors who came to this site had to climb the very steep pathway, as we see here, up the lower slopes of Mount Parnassus. They entered the sanctuary by a ceremonial gate that was located in the southeast corner. And what would happen is that people would climb and they would zigzag up, back and forth, these staircases. They would zigzag back and forth up what was known as the Sacred Way. And there they would move past numerous treasuries and memorials that were built by the city-states, and they would arrive at the long colonnade of the Temple of Apollo. In these sanctuaries, there would be this inclusion of treasuries that were built by the citizens of the Greek city-states. And here we have this small, luxurious, and this is a drawing, a recreation of the treasury of the Siphnians. It was built in the sanctuary of Apollo at Delphi. And instead of our traditional columns, whether it be Doric or Ionic, the builders used what are two stately caryatids. And we would see this in the Erechtheion as well. These are columns that are carved in the form of clothed women. And they would most likely have that sort of archaic smile that we've seen in Greek art during this time period. And the women were done in finely pleated, flowing garments raised on a pedestal and balancing the elaborate carved capital on top of their heads. Now, the capital support of a tall entablature conforming to the Ionic order, which features sort of this plain three-paneled architrave. Now, both the continuous frieze and the pediments of the Siphnian treasury were originally filled with relief sculptures. And the only surviving section of the frieze from this building is found from the north side. And what we have here is the legendary, very common theme, the battle between the gods and the giants. Now, it's noted for its complex representation of space. The sculptor wanted to give a sense of three-dimensional recession, and how they pulled it off was by creating the overlapping figures. And sometimes we see three deep, varying in the depths of the relief, and allow the viewer to grasp sort of like their placement within the space. We have lions and soldiers, and we see the shields and spears, and I even think we have a chariot in there somewhere as well. Originally, and like a lot of works by the Greeks, originally such a sculpture would have been painted with bright color to enhance, to sort of get it to pop off a little bit, the lifelike effect. So the background might have been blue, and then we would have had our flesh tones and our reds and our yellows out at that time. So to come back to this slide, what's behind the building of such structures? And we have to understand that when we study our ancient art and architecture and art history, this is being built for religious purposes, to give people answers. It's a sacred site that kind of evolved over time. No longer do we just have altars on the outside. Now we're building structures over the top of altars. The Greeks used a lot of marble in their construction as well. One other thing is that we have the birth of sort of a priest class, the oracles, and it makes them very special. These are the people that have the only sort of hotline to the gods. And so we have that also that social effect. We're having festivals, we're having games in honor of the Pythian games in the stadiums. But as we think about, as you walk up the sacred way that zigzags back and forth, what you're having here is sort of that ooh and ah factor when we are in sites like this, that you have to kind of go to a special site. I would compare these sacred sites to things sort of like in the Japanese religion of Shintoism, where there are sacred spots throughout the country of Japan. It could be the top of a mountain, it could be a tree, but it's the idea that that area is sacred. Thanks for listening.